Hi, and welcome to our second Through the Looking Glass of Leadership Conversations with Leaders. I'm Rena Goldenberg-Lynch, the founder and CEO of Voice at the Table, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation with Laura Anderson, our guest today. Hi, Laura.
Hi, Rena. Hi, everyone.
So Laura is she leads the emerging talent department at HSBC UK. And she's also a vice chair on the board of directors of the Institute of Student Employers. So our focus today is going to be on emerging talent, on early careers, to see how diversity and inclusion makes a difference to them, how organizations think about them in terms of their future leaders, their future employees, and what that actually means. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. Let me start with a very same question as I've asked everybody else on this conversations. You know, our theme for this entire year is to see inclusion as a driver of success, of business success. And I just wondered, would you be able to say what you think about that? What does that mean to you, that theme?
Oh, that's a nice, easy question to start with, Rena, isn't it? I guess for me, it's the backbone of everything that certainly I do, my team does, and what we do at HSBC, because managing early careers programs, so we're talking graduates. I think most people would assimilate early careers with grads, interns and industrial placements, but we have a lot of apprentices as well. So because of the range of people that we have on our program, we have so many different demographics of people coming through our cohorts each year. So part of our strategy when it comes to inclusion at HSBC is to do with the 3 R's. So one of them's representation. So making sure that our cohorts are representative of our customer base and the other colleagues around us. The respect that we have for each other and respecting themselves and other people. And then the other R is reputation. So a lot of what we deal with is, from an early careers perspective, is thinking about how do future employees of the bank sort of feel about us, and why would they want to come and work for us, and then when people are here, actually, what do they think about the real life experience? So yeah, it comes in all forms, I would say, but we can only be successful if we address all of those things.
And that's really interesting. So you're addressing it from representation of clients, which is the business need, the respect to get along with your colleagues and be not just tolerant, but mindful of how different people are across the board, not just with each other. And the reputation, of course, makes sense. You don't want to be in the wrong headlines. Is that, broadly speaking, also the focus of other student employers?
I would say so, yeah, because at the Institute of Student Employers, we are a membership organisation for anyone that's working in the early career space. So we have employer members, we have supplier partners, so those that help us recruit and run our programs, and then we have university and school members as well. So you're getting a complete cross-section of perspectives and things like that, but consistently when you're speaking to any of those groups of membership, ED&I definitely is a focal point, and is a focal point for the IIC itself as well. And we have a particular mission around about EDI and why the IEC exists in terms of the resources and the research it's able to provide for its members.
Oh, it's amazing. Amazing to hear that, and very encouraging. But before we delve into more detail, Laura, I was going to ask you to give us a little bit more context to the emerging talent team. You know, how many students do you take in and that's just students, so early careers every year? What do they look like? Where do they come from? Just give us a little idea of your sort of annual job?
Okay, how long have we got for that question?
5 minutes?
So I guess the context of my role is that I look after everything from a development and programme perspective for emerging talent for the UK Bank. So HSBC is a massive organisation and we have different teams looking after different parts of the organisation. So my particular focus is around about the retail and the commercial bank within the UK. And as I mentioned, we recruit graduates every year, interns, industrial placements, so those that have chosen to go down our university route from education. And we have students from, or graduates from the UK and from overseas join our programmes. And we also have a lot of apprentices, and I in particular support our degree apprenticeships. So those are 4.5-year programmes where people come into the organisation and they work and earn their salaries, and then 1 day a week they get study leave to complete a degree qualification alongside full-time study. I have no idea how they do this. They are incredible. And I think the beauty of our apprenticeships is you see people come from all different backgrounds and sort of career pathways. So we quite often get people straight out of school. So that's always embarrassing when I tell people I've been at HSBC over 20 years now, and there's people in the room that haven't even been born. That always gets a bit of a reaction. They always humble me greatly. But within our apprenticeship, like we have people in their 50s as well. So it runs right through the generations, the ages, the life stages. So you have people that are doing this alongside raising families and all those sorts of things. So like I feel so privileged that I get to work with all these different people in sort of different perspectives. But at any one point in time, there's sort of 380, I think, is our sort of number once we've got all our interns and things in each summer. So
380?
yes, 380.
Oh, that's a big number.
So that it's chunky. I don't do it alone. I have quite a large team that help me, and I wouldn't be able to do it without them for sure.
Yeah, so let's talk about that team as well. As one of my questions for you is what does diversity and inclusion mean to you in terms of your leadership style, and how you use it with your team?
Yeah. I think for me, like my brand is all about being genuine and leading by example. So for me, it's not just an initiative or a meeting we have every so often. It's genuinely ingrained in everything that we do. So when I was trying to think of, okay, what is specific examples could I share that would be useful for people to take away from this call, it does get quite hard because a lot of it's just part and parcel of what we do. We don't consciously think about it. We have done in the past, like for sure, because a lot of what I do and like I lead my team to do is like talk about real issues. So like if I think back to, I don't know, 2020 and what happened with George Floyd, like that kick-started a flywheel effect of lots of initiatives that at the time were unique and different because we'd never done them before, but they still exist now and they are just red-threaded through everything that we do. But it used to be a point where we had to consciously think, okay, what's going on in the world that could be impacting people here, and react to it, and so that we didn't miss anything, because I think the worst thing that can happen if there is something on people's mind because of what's going on externally is to not address it. And it used to be a conscious thing that my team and I would do, but now it's automatic. So what happened at the Supreme Court a couple of weeks ago, we didn't even have to consciously think, what are we going to do? We just kicked into gear with that. So we were there for our trans colleagues and the questions and things they might be having. We were thinking automatically about our people that are going to be joining us this year, what they might be wondering about, and being able to like actively address things rather than being reactive to things. So yeah, like for me, it's just inbuilt almost into our DNA when it comes to that side of things.
Which is great, because really that's essentially where we want to get to, where diversity and inclusion and equity, so fairness in process, is BAU, business as usual, for everyone to think along. And you know, I know that you HSBC do it as well, but when it comes to inclusive leadership, for instance, you know, any kind of leadership development, it's great to see that as being part and parcel of who you are as a leader. And it sounds like it's started paying its dividends. You know, the programs that you instituted early on after the murder of George Floyd have started paying dividends, in that they have become the fabric of leadership at HSBC and the way that you think about it. Would you say that that is the case?
Yeah, definitely. And I think if I compare, going back a few years, like the work that our employee resource groups, our ERGs would do, or our early careers community would do, so that's where people volunteer from our programs to get involved in different things. It was much more sort of, I guess, in the education field of diversity, so like helping people understand about different characteristics and impacts. And like we go back to like sort of teaching people about microaggressions and code switching and like things like that. That still happens because there's still a need to help educate and upskill people, but
Yes.
you see a lot more activity that's sort of directed in sort of the mentoring phase, or like helping people with their careers, rather than just focusing a label around about whichever ERG that particular
Yeah.
group is sort of targeting. So much more inclusive, much more streamlined, and inbuilt into what we're doing.
And do you think it's important then, you know, now that you're at a point where all of it is already, you know, included into your fabric in the way that HSBC works, for instance, do you think it's important to continue to do that, raising awareness and some of the other initiatives that we've seen much more, that were much more commonplace in organizations earlier on?
100%, because I was thinking as you spoke there, Rena, I was like, could we not do it? Was how I was thinking about it. And I was
Yes,
like,
exactly.
I genuinely don't think how we wouldn't do that. I think we adapt. We're always adapting and doing things differently. We're always learning. I'm not saying we're perfect. I don't think we'll ever be perfect, because there's always going to be things that we can do, and we have to adapt to the challenges and things that are coming down the line, particularly in early careers. We have more generations in the workforce than we've ever had before. We have Gen Z in the workforce, and I know they get a bad rep a lot of the time. I personally don't agree with that. I think there's a lot of myths around about generations and what it means to be Gen Z, etc. But yeah, you have to keep adapting. I don't think we can rest on our laurels, but I think the core of what employee resource groups and things like that do is always going to be needed for 100%.
Yeah. And I'm glad you say that, because also we have seen it where, let's say, even as a society, if we take our foot off the pedal on, let's say, some of the women's initiatives, or driving women in careers, etc., that it can fall backwards. And we have, especially after COVID and the pandemic, we've seen numbers shift backwards. You know, so I think it's very important to maintain the initiatives alongside with what you're doing, is, you know, embracing it as part of, you know, the way that you work as an organization.
Yeah.
And it's great to hear as well, because a lot of organizations are also thinking that employee resource groups are, you know, redundant nowadays, and absolutely, I agree with you that there's a huge role that they can continue to play.
Yeah, and I think definitely the intersectionality of the collaboration that they can play is key, because we're really lucky that we have a lot of employee resource groups, but the danger is then they get diluted, and it feels like you can maybe only align with one or two, or like you don't have time to attend everything. So like we've
Yes.
done a lot of focus with, we have particular early careers community groups that are focused on particular areas that are apprentices and our graduates care about and they want to get involved in, and they particularly have an early careers lens to them.
Oh, lovely.
But we've done a lot of work around about, well, why can't the neurodiversity working group collaborate with the ethnic diversity one? Like, why can't you do a joint event or approach this from a different perspective? So there's a lot more collaboration in terms of events rather than doing events in silos, because you're much stronger together than you are with individual activity.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it helps spread the message and the experience, the lived experience of the different groups as well.
Yeah.
And we're not ever just one person, right? We are, you know, a combination of different diversity groups anyway. So it's very good to continue to do that.
Yeah.
Can I also, I'll go back to you know, the way that you described the, let's say, the 380 people that come in every year. It sounds like they are very diverse generationally, as well as from their background, and, you know, in any possible way, shape, or form. So the first question on that is how does that compare to, if there is such a thing, the average bank employee? You know, if you look at, you know, this is the incoming talent coming in, and then you have the managers and the leaders, you know, in commercial and you said retail banking.
Mm-hmm.
Are they very different from the rest of the bank, or are they still quite similar to the rest of the institution? I know that you don't have the numbers necessarily, and that's not what I'm after, but
Yeah.
kind of a sense for, has there been a shift, is what I suppose I'm saying.
I think because they're a concentrated population, so each year we probably bring in, I'm trying to think in total, probably about 150 new people into the early careers community, because some of them then roll off and things like
Yes,
that. So it
yes.
builds. I'd say like I've been in early careers now for the last like 8.5 years. Have they changed significantly in that point in time? I don't know if they have. Definitely what we look when we focus on how do we attract people onto our programs, there's a lot more concerted activity around about, like in particular, say social mobility, for example, whereas that was never really spoken about when I was first on the managing the programs sort of 8.5 years ago. But that doesn't mean to say there wasn't social mobility
Okay, yeah,
within our programs. It just
fair enough.
wasn't a focus area.
Mhm.
But I do think sort of the people that come onto our programs and join are reflective of our wider organisation and our values. It's certainly something we champion when we go out to attract people into our programs, when we recruit people, and our hiring managers, for example, are all specifically trained to understand how to recruit in an equitable way without avoiding sort of bias and things like that. So like one of our values is we value difference. It's probably my favourite value of the organisation, because it's how we live and breathe things every day. So from our strategic decisions right down to the day-to-day interactions we have with customers and colleagues. So yeah, I'd like to say it's representative of all of our different perspectives, for sure.
Yeah, and maybe that's also the driver of this kind of, you know, all the initiatives and the ERGs, and, you know, the feeling that it's okay to be, you know, diversity and inclusion are real for this institution, and therefore we'll continue to promote them for all the right reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the other bit I wanted to talk to you about. So you said that, you know, you've got, you know, all 5 generations represented, or maybe all 4 generations represented in this pool, which must be quite challenging, or at least that's what we hear, that it's quite challenging.
Mm-hmm.
The generation is inspired or motivated differently. So how do you deal with that generally?
Talking about it, I think, is the main things, and almost leveraging our differences as drivers.
Mm.
So how can we take what's different about us all and find the common ground and use that to extract value in whatever we're doing. So we do a lot of focus around about skills-based hiring, and developing skills for the future roles, which whatever they might look like, etc. And I think a lot of that stems from the fact that we do need to approach things differently than maybe we have in the past. And if we just had all the same generations and the same people in the same life stages with the same formative years and experience, like that's not going to get a different result. So I think embracing the different generations is a good thing. Avoiding putting labels on them. So a boomer is this, a Gen X is that, a millennial's the next thing. And like actually understanding that a lot of the things that are tied to generations are linked to different life stages.
Yeah.
So it's not actually that generation as a whole, it's just where that generation is in life. And sort of starting to unpack that. And one of the things that we do a lot of work with is with our managers to help them understand early careers. And in particular, remembering what it was like when you first started in the workforce, like what was your first role and what did you have to learn, and getting them to realise that actually some of it's not so different, but some of it is different, and it's appreciating those differences and then how the intergenerationally people can work together better. So yeah, we put a lot of work and effort into that, and that definitely I think sort of reaps rewards. I would say that's what we hear across different members with the ISE as well, that's what people are finding, for sure.
Okay, so that's music to my ears, because we've been talking about the value of diversity and to business in particular, and that was going to be my next question as well. Is obviously the reason that you want the generations to understand each other and collaborate is for the benefit to the business, to leverage the various experiences, expectations, and perspectives. How does the business leverage that? Do you have any ideas or examples or thoughts about, what is that wealth that translates, that the diversity, that the value of diversity that translates into concrete benefits for the bank?
So this is probably where I'm a little bit less connected with the specifics of what happens in placements and things for early careers, and my team would probably be jumping at the bit to give you so many examples, Rena, because they are far closer to it than I am. But I think if I can reflect on our internship population who join us for 10 weeks every summer, and many organisations will run internships as well, and we give everyone a real life experience. So come in, you're going to do a job for 10 weeks. That's an expectation, but we also give them additional projects and things to do to elevate their skills and experience and maximise the opportunity. And one of the things that we do ask them to do is, last year we asked them to think about our 3 R's inclusion strategy that I spoke about at the start of the call. And we're like, okay, put that into a video. Like if you were to put that out there to the world, what would that look like in your eyes? And I think that was very eye-opening for us. We had, I think, sort of 8 or 10 different groups, and I think generationally you think, okay, all Gen Z are digital savvy, they know everything to do with AI and tech and things like that. And we very much overestimated their abilities to create these videos, these TikTok style videos and things, because we'd made an assumption that that's what their generation was able to do. And actually what they came back with was very different. We did have some people that were spot on, maybe influencers, I'm not sure, but other people really struggled with it, or approached it in a completely different way. And I think what that showed to us is that you might have an idea of how somebody might behave or how they might approach something, but what they come with is completely different. But regardless of how they did it, when you look at what did they bring to the table, they were bringing completely different perspectives, things that we'd never thought before, and get really challenged around our thinking. Yeah. When it came to the topics that they were sort of talking about. And it almost made us sort of do a double take. So I think the value there is it challenges some inbuilt beliefs that you might have, it challenges biases, assumptions, and gets you to think differently. So almost they're a little bit like a stick of dynamite. They sort of give you a bit of a shake almost, and sort of make you take a step back, which I think when you've been in a role or an organisation for a while, like I have, that's a really good sort of temperature check of, okay, where are we going and what are we doing here?
Yeah, and it's a great example of what we kind of summarize as diversity is the reward for inclusion.
Mm,
You know, once you've got all that diversity, how is it going to benefit you? Well, first of all, you have to have inclusion to make sure that people are, you know, happy and able to share all their ideas and thinking, so that those assumptions that you talked about can be challenged. And I also refer to it as the diversity lens, is to recognize that even a wrong, you know, in quotes, a wrong
mm,
contribution or a wrong result can lead to a new idea, and that idea will be monumental, you know.
yeah.
So making that space, allowing for that space to challenge the assumptions, to challenge what you're doing, and then coming up with these great other ideas that you would have never thought of because there was no reason. That is one of the main benefits of
Yeah.
allowing for that kind of diverse contribution.
And interesting enough that, well, over the last couple of weeks, we've been running development town halls for our early careers community. And one of the sessions that we run is Embrace the Stumble. So
Love
it's the
it.
con yeah, me too. I'm always making mistakes. I'm like, yeah, look, what can we learn from this? But we were talking about the concept of philosophy. So when you fail, what do you learn from it? And if you don't challenge yourself to do something different and come outside your comfort zone where you might fail, you're never going to achieve anything. So, but there is this challenge, or I think maybe barrier that early careers come in with, particularly, or we find with our degree apprentices, from when you think about the transition from work into employment, so student to professional, which is a lot of work a lady called Rebecca Fielding has done from Grad Consult, and talks about sort of the seismic shift that you have when you go from that structured education and environment, into work and the things that you need to sort of deal with. There is this sort of barrier that people have around about needing to get it right and it has to be perfect, and not admitting when you don't know things or you're stuck or actually I've messed up here. And what we try and do is take away some of the stigma and the beliefs people have around about that, and actually knowing that it's okay to do those things, because that's when we can have our biggest successes. But it's not people, it's not what people come into an organization thinking about, and I'm sure most people listening to this would probably resonate with that too.
That's really interesting as well, because yeah, I do remember having to undo a lot of the work that universities and schools do in terms of creating certain expectations of how you perform best in an employment environment. And it's great that it's almost like you're undoing some of the bad habits or some of the expectations that are not necessarily real, to bring out the best contribution from people.
Yeah, and I think universities are trying to do a lot of that as well.
Are they?
Because so with this student to professional pilot that we've been part of with Rebecca at Grad Consult, there's been university partners with that and employers, and I think sort of both sides of the fence are trying to sort of unpick some of those things. And I think sort of the challenge probably remains in the school space, because a lot of teachers and things don't have all of the time to be able to tackle these things. So the more employers can do, and like HSBC is one of them, but many others, like we can all go out and play our part in education and things like that to address things earlier, which is something that we're a big party to.
That's great. That's great to hear. I also want to encourage our guests to ask questions. If you want to pop your questions into the chat, we will address them. And I want to turn to the sort of the final part of this conversation, which is around the trends and the challenges of the bank and then the emerging talent and the future of work and how diversity and inclusion helps address that. And just wondered if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so what are our challenges? I think sometimes you can get distracted by the day-to-day things that cross your desk and come into your inbox and things like that. But for me, because we have squiggly careers and people don't join an organization for a lifetime anymore, traditionally there's a big shift away from that. I think retaining people is probably the biggest challenge for a lot of organizations, and particularly early careers. They are not shy in going somewhere else if they don't like what they're seeing. And not necessarily for pay or career progression, but if their values don't align with the values of an organization, then that's a big problem and you're going to lose people. So when people join an early careers program, there's a lot of investment from an organization into their pre-boarding, their onboard and induction period, their whole development program. There is investment from that organization. And that's wasted if then people come in and they've been promised the world and then they get in and they're like, that's not really like that here. So for me, the challenge is if our words and actions don't align, then that's going to cause as a problem. So we put a lot of work into making sure that before even people start, they understand our culture, they understand our values, and then they see that in every communication and every interaction that they have with us. And then that's great if I can control everything and everything's done through the emerging talent team, but the reality is that's not the case. So there's a lot of work then working alongside our D&I teams in HSBC, but our employee resource groups, our managers, etc., to make sure that we are putting people into the right places with the right managers that understand these things, that are able to have open conversations and do all of the things that we would want them to do. And then making sure that's consistent throughout their journey and beyond. I think most organisations would want that to be the case, but that does require you to put in the work and the effort, and I think listen to people to understand what is it they need and want, and how do we adapt to that.
And spot on, because I think saying it is so much more difficult, doing it is so much more difficult than saying it, and that's what I've noticed in a lot of organizations. Is not some organizations are very good at attracting, but then retaining, because it's not part of your fabric, part of how you think or act. It becomes more difficult to retain people. And I also, there is a sense also that some large organizations, and you might think you would talk about HSBC in that space as well, but I've heard and I've seen other large organizations not really worrying about the supply. The supply of incoming talent, because they feel that they are a star in a way, as an organization, so there will always be people who will come along and will want to work there, and my sense is that HSBC doesn't necessarily, it's not like that. You really think very hard about making sure. Is that right?
100%. So we do get a lot of applicants for our roles across the industry of early careers. There's, I think I was reading something research-wise that there's 140 applicants for every graduate role, and I think apprenticeships are getting up to sort of that level as well.
Wow.
But for me, it's not just about having numbers on a program and sheep dipping them and passing them out the other end. there's much more to it. And like that's where I get all my energy from, is working with the early careers people. And like we have such a massive community of people, because they're so purpose driven. Generally that's what we found. Like they genuinely care, they want to make a difference. So we lean into that as much as possible. And when we run inductions or development events, it's not the early careers team that are running things, and we don't often bring in external vendors either. We allow the early careers community to create that content, create that space to share what they've learned and pass on that learning and that interaction and things. And we recently ran an insights program, so that's for first year university students. And all 3 sessions that we ran around about female empowerment, social mobility, and Black heritage, ethnicity and culture, they were all delivered by early careers individuals, because it's not for me, as I'd say relatively privileged white female at this stage in her career. Yes, I was the first in uni to go, first in family to go to university. I went to the worst school in the area, but that was 20 years ago. That's very different to the experiences of people now, and people want to hear from people like them. So I think that's where the magic is, but you can only make that happen if you're living and breathing that culture day in and day out, because you can't just tell people to come and say this to them to get them to come on board, because they're just going to see through that. Because when they start, they look around the room and they don't see anyone that looks like them, or the first session that you do has graphics on that somebody that's neurodiverse wouldn't be able to follow. So like you need to follow through in everything that you're doing there.
And I can vouch for that as well, because, you know, when we work together on some of the workshops that we deliver for you as well, it's always working with somebody from the cohort, you know, and they're a big, you know, if not the leader of that conversation, they are a big part of that conversation. And the HSBC permanent person alongside will always take their views into account and always ask for their contribution as well. So I've seen it in action as well. So it's really,
I'm glad.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. There are quite a few questions coming in, so I'm just very keen to address them. So let me go through them for you. The first one is, what are your persuasive reasons to ensure that diversity and inclusion endeavors continue to attract investment in your organization? So what are the reasons that you would tell somebody with budget, put some money into D&I?
My persuasive ones as well.
Thank you, Geraldine.
Yeah, thanks for that nice, easy question, Geraldine. No, I like it. I like being challenged. So for me, I genuinely think you can make an impact from nothing, provided that you want to do it. So like I originally started with a team of 2. I mean, I don't even think we had a budget back then. My team is now, I don't know, there's maybe 16 of us. I probably should know how many people are in my team, but it's something new started today. So like for me, that we need to inspire people and like using role models in your business. So for me, they might not listen to what Laura's got to say, and if I do need budget, then they might not just believe what I've got to say. But if I've got role models and stakeholders in the business that I know will get behind me and support me, 100% I am having a chat with them and getting them on board. And over the years, I've built up so many different people, like from a sponsorship perspective, that will support any of our initiatives like that. I think anything that you can use research-based is really good. So that's a big part of the ISE's ED&I mission and strategy, is how do we help organisations or universities to create strategies that do support the sort of raising of cultural belonging and things like that within sort of organisations. So yeah, inspiring people is a good one. creating opportunities where you can. So like I shared before, sort of using your early careers community and things like that. Because if you can evidence you can do some things in-house, then you can showcase, well, actually, this is where we've got a gap. And that's what we've done with your services, Rena, at Voice at the Table. We've been able to say, this is the part that we can't do in-house, so let's bring you in to do that. So you don't need to spend lots and lots of budget sort of covering absolutely everything. If you look at what you've got within your organisations, I think that's the key point. And sort of there's then the trade-off to say, we're going to do this and then this is what we need. And I've never had anyone sort of challenge me on that sort of business case or rationale.
You're very, very skilled at this, I can tell. It's a great answer, thank you.
My manager loves conversations with me. I'm like, why wouldn't you want to do this? So the story is powerful, yeah.
Yeah, I know whom to call next time I have a conversation with one of your ISC colleagues.
Yeah, I think as well, like we've over the years, like my team and I, we've won a lot of awards externally as well. And I think a lot of those awards have been won on the back of our discretionary effort and the things that we've done. And not because anyone said we had to, but we recognised the needs and we had that desire to put that effort in. And I think you then build that credibility both internally and externally to say, actually, yes, we do want to continue and to invest in this. So like last year we won Best Financial Services Provider at the Multicultural Apprenticeship Award. So we'd never won that before. So like that was like great. It was a great feeling within the team and things like that, but it also has that impact sort of longer term. So I know, Rena, you've got awards coming up for Voice at the Table. So I think anyone who's thinking about this, maybe consider entering those awards and things like that, because it's not only a great feeling if you do win, but even to be shortlisted or to be entered and things, that carries a lot of weight when you're trying to look for that investment.
Okay, that's really good to know as well, actually, the connection between the investment and winning. That's very helpful. Let me move on to Barbara's question, which is a little bit about the measures of support that you give women during motherhood and fathers as well, to allow them to continue their careers and progress it up the ladder if they wanted to, without the motherhood penalty.
Yep. So interestingly, like within my team, I've currently got 2 on maternity leave. I've had 3 come back for maternity leave as well. One's done that twice as well. So I live and breathe it with my team. But even within our early careers community, we've had graduates go on maternity leave and come back. So we pause their programme for a year and pick up. We've had a couple of degree apprentices also go on maternity leave. We've had some paternity leave, and we've had some shared parental leave. So I think one of the things that, in particular, when we took over the degree apprenticeships, and that happened sort of 3-4 years ago, my team took them on. It really opened my eyes to the different life stages, because historically our graduates had always been sort of just out of university. We didn't have a lot of people like getting married or like starting families or like buying properties and things like that. It was sort of more stable, I guess, in terms of they were living at home or they were sharing with friends and things like that. But taking on the apprentices, it really opened my eyes up to say, there's no pigeonholes for any of these people in our programs. There probably never was, but it made me really think about how do we make sure that people know about all of our employee resource groups. So we have particular groups around about nurture, so starting a family, the challenges with like IVF, for example. Oh, sorry, that's Journey that does that. We have Nurture, who looks at people at different stages in life. So for example, we do things around about the menopause and perimenopause, and so different things, and we don't make an assumption. So we open these things up to everyone. And it's something that's sort of ingrained from there. So yeah, there's lots of success stories of where people have started families and come back into the organisation and been able to sort of balance both and flexible working and things like that. But what I would say is it's probably not talked about enough. So there's probably more that we can do to sort of amplify that both internally and externally.
Mm. Well, it's great to know that all that is happening is not just the provision of the maternity leave, but also how the return is integrated and the continuation of one's career, and also the fact that you're thinking about the various sort of stages in a person's life and how that might impact them. So, like you said, menopause and perimenopause, and some of the and the fatherhood, you know, being able to take parental leave and share it as well. It just sounds to me, because it's interesting, because at first, when we first came on, you said we don't really think about it. It's part of who we are. And, you know, the more I hear it, the more I hear you talk, you think about it a lot. And it doesn't feel like you're thinking about diversity and inclusion. You're just thinking about how do we, you know, make this place the best place we can be for all the different people who come from various different backgrounds, so that they can contribute fully and enjoy themselves.
Yep.
It's yeah, go on.
I think I often I feel like this role and what I do is like my ikigai. It's like my sweet spot. But like I always think about like how does that person, how do I want that person to feel sort of being here? And I always say, like, I want people to be them true selves here and feel valued and included and things like that. And I think you can't do that if you don't think about their whole self. And like your working life's only one part of your life, isn't it? So yeah, I think sort of for people to really truly embrace the organisation they're with, they need to feel that they are treated like an individual, and that organisation is there to support them, and that's what my team, we straddle that to make sure that happens.
Yeah, and and you get better at it the more you do it as well. So you know, that's the other thing, is you don't have to be sort of naturally predisposed to this. It is the more you do it, the better you get at it, like anything else, like any other.
And like we like, as I said before, that we've got it wrong before. Like we've not thought about something, and then you like somebody says something, you're like, I didn't even clock it because it wasn't on my radar and nobody else has picked that up and things like that. But I think having that open speak up culture is also really important, to know that actually we might not get it right all of the time, but tell us about it and what we can do about it, and we'll make sure it doesn't happen again. So yeah, you're right, we probably do think about it, but we don't think about it as like, okay, that's D&I activity.
Exactly.
It's not a project bucket or anything like that.
Exactly.
It's just a consideration with everything.
Yes, it's part of your strategy and your being as a business. Yeah. I have a question here about, you know, how you balance the different pathways of entry and access to careers within HSBC. So you've got people from, you know, obviously different walks of life, but also different disciplines and different ways in. How do you balance that?
So as much as possible, we try and be consistent between, I'll just talk about graduates and apprentices because I sort of keep things simple. But people that have gone to university have had the opportunity, I guess, with their career services and different things, and they've had more time living maybe away from home and things than maybe an apprentice who's coming straight out of school. So those are two profiles that we might have within our programs. We have many more, but even if I just compare those two, we try and give them the same journey and experience, but we maybe just tweak some things, particularly for the apprentices, or give a bit more focus to certain aspects. So last year, we particularly identified a need that when people are starting in the organisation, they've maybe not been to university, have not done an internship or something like that, they maybe need a little bit more support with that transition from education to employment. So like, how do you go from being an individual who is told exactly what to do, this is the assignment you need to do, this is how you need to write it to get this many marks, and you submit it by this deadline. And it's an individual piece of work and nobody else is impacted if you pass or fail. Whereas you come into employment, you're working across generations, across different groups. Nobody's going to spoon feed you or tell you this is exactly how it needs to be done. You don't realise the impact of if you mess up and you've not delivered on time, how that can impact another deliverable or another person. So we've done work around about workshops when people first start, individualised psychometric reports for them to understand where do their strengths lie and where are their development areas. So that is one thing that we have done differently between apprentices and graduates. And I think it's understanding that you can be consistent across your programs, but you can then also adapt where you need to.
And a related question to that also is, how do you ensure that your intake of apprentices is representative as well?
So I guess no different from our graduate hiring or anything like that. We have different attraction strategies for our different areas across the country. We have different, we used to always hire nationwide for our programmes, and we've recently shifted. Apprentices have always been hired to specific locations, and graduates and interns were changing that, so they're now hired to specific locations too. So that's brought about a change in requirements for our attraction strategy to try and we have a big challenge with people all wanting to be in London, or a large majority wanting to be in London. A lot of the research suggests that's what happens with students, particularly at university too. So there is no one particular attraction strategy. It's all very much dependent on sort of need and how many we're hiring in different areas and things, what we do. But we do a lot of outreach work with schools as well to help educate people and parents in particular as well about sort of the different entry routes, different requirements and things like that. So that's probably a whole other discussion in itself. And I can recommend Mark and our recruitment team, Rena, if you want to deep dive into that a lot more.
It sounds like you're doing a lot. You said there's no particular strategy, but actually, you know, like what I was saying earlier, you do a lot. You think about, you know, you don't hire just locally. You go into the different areas, you know, to meet the needs nationally, and you also bear in mind that you want representation as one of your 3 R's,
and I think if we didn't do that, we would only get people applying from certain areas where they understand about the different routes and things like that, or maybe there's more money in that education system or that council to do those sorts of things. So employers, and beg all employers to do more of this outreach activity and reach more and more people, so that we do level that playing field for people.
And also when you go into schools and talk to the parents. I think that's really important, talking to the parents, actually, not just the schools and the students. We are running out of time, Laura. I know that we could continue. You get so many great ideas and initiatives, and not real initiatives, but things that you really do. And that is kind of a recurring theme that I've noticed, that organizations that we consider, or leaders we consider to be quite inclusive, from knowing them, from interacting with them, they say, oh, we don't do anything special. And then find out they do so much. They do so much because you really think about it, and it's part of who you are, and it's fantastic. And I'm so pleased that we get the opportunity to work together and to know you. And I know that we've also awarded you last year with the Voice of the Table Milestone Award for that reason. And I'm sure that there will be many, many more awards coming your way. Thank you so much for your time today.
No worries.
I'm sure we'll have you back if you are willing to come back, because this program will continue into next year as well.
Always, Rena. I know it's been a pleasure having a conversation about this. It's not often you get to sit down and get into it. So no, I appreciate it. And thanks everyone for your questions.
Thank you, Laura. And before we finish, we do have a link for some feedback for you. And I also wanted to briefly bring up a slide on those Inclusion Leader Awards that you mentioned. Laura, thank you very much for the mention. So our Inclusion Leader Awards, the nominations are currently open. We have 12 different categories, and really what we're looking for are leaders who, like Laura, use diversity, use inclusion for various aspects of their business to succeed. Following the Inclusion Leader winners will be announced at our conference, which is going to take place on the 4th of November. And that is the conference we're calling the Inclusion Dividend. And again, it's going to be lots of conversations like the one that we just had with Laura, where we're talking about, you know, different aspects of business, taking the value, the benefit of diversity and applying the diversity lens to that area of business. Things like marketing, risk management, talent management, of course. You know, we're talking about innovation, we'll talk about sustainability. So all the different topics that every leader will cover as a routine sort of business challenge, and we will talk about how those leaders use diversity and inclusion to get to address those challenges. So join us. Tickets are on sale right now. All this information will be coming your way in a follow-up email anyway. We do have early bird pricing right now. If you wanted to take advantage, it will be a very interesting conversation indeed all day with the ILA winners at the end of the day. And that's it for today. Thanks again very much for coming on board, Laura. It's always a great conversation with you. Thank you everyone for your questions, for your participation, for coming along. And we'll send you an email with a follow-up and the link to book for the next one. And the next conversation is on the 5th of June. It's quite soon. So please sign up to that. And Laura, please come along as a guest as well, whenever you want.
I'll be able to throw them questions. I like
exactly.
it.
Put them on the spot. Exactly. Thank you all very much. Thanks a lot, Laura. Take care.
Thanks all. Bye.
Bye-bye.